Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. My lord, any suggestions on how to program 5x5 as an intermediate lifter? I really like them and they have been good to me so far, but I feel like it's beating me up going balls to the wall at each of them, each session as my strengths have grown. Should I maybe go RPE-based or percentage-based, start low, increasing the percentages each week or something? No, you need to quit doing straight 5x5. If you're a legitimate intermediate lifter, I'm not saying you can't do 5x5s. I'm an advanced lifter and I work 5x5s in. On my accessory movements, my assistance movements, things like that, right? When you're an intermediate lifter, you don't need to do 5x5 every workout. You're going to have to periodize things. Meaning you might have a day where you do 5x5s, but you're going to have to rotate stuff around. Usually as an intermediate lifter, you're either going to stick with a 3-day-a-week full body in which you use different intensity levels, like a heavy, medium, light, or you might have a 5x5, which is going to be more of your volume day, and then a heavier day where you either do max triples, build up to a 5-rep max, things like that, and sometimes even a lighter day, right, with even a little more training volume. So almost an undulating system, or heavy, medium, light, or you will go to like an upper lower and maybe do, if you want to keep a 5x5 in and you don't want to do any sort of linear periodization, then you do like concurrent. So your 5x5 might be for your slightly more volume oriented day, and then you'll throw in additional assistance movements with even more volume, and then maybe have a heavier day where you're doing 3x3s. Right? So what you're going to have to do is periodize. I mean, if you're no longer a novice lifter, you're not just going to come in and do the same reps and sets every training session. You're going to have to actually program now. That's the difference between training programming versus linear progression. Right? You understand the difference? Linear progression, you do the same training, you just slowly add weight and adjust the weight on the bar. Programming, you're going to actually change reps and sets from workout to workout or from block to block. And if you're doing it block to block, you're not going to be on 5x5 anymore, because you're going to change it every block. You might be doing 10s, 8s, 5s, 3s, 1s in different phases. And then with different amounts of assistance movement. So you're going to actually have to program. Welcome to training with the big boys. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. Please, if you can, elaborate on training footwear. What do you suggest for different compound exercises? I see you wear combat boots as well as squat shoes. Actually, I don't wear either one of those right now. I actually wear Timbs. I wear work boots. And I wear them because they're grippy with a hard sole, right? And it's not really an elevated heel. So that's actually what you see me in. I don't wear squat shoes anymore. Now, if people are going to do Olympic squatting, or if you're going to do an Olympic style squat, or you're going to do power cleans or snatches or things like that, or you have a problem with your mobility and you need to go really deep, weightlifting shoes are good. For people who have established mobility, who are not trying to go ass to grass on your squats, if you're only trying to go 1 to 2 inches below parallel, you don't need an elevated heel once you've built your mobility up. It's not necessary. You can go to flats of some type. You can go to work boots. You can go to chucks. Footwear needs to depend upon if you're trying to create a deficit or not. In my case, I use work boots for all my pulling. Why? They have a thicker sole. It creates a small deficit. It makes the lift harder. If your goal is to lift as much weight as possible on a lift from the floor, you're going to want to minimize that. That's where either deadlift slippers or Vibrams, like I actually have 4 sets of Vibrams. I'll pull in Vibrams. You guys have seen me pull in Vibrams. That's what I wear in comps. So a lot of it comes down to specifically what you are trying to do. That's what footwear comes down to. Now, what's inappropriate is tennis shoes or running shoes for lifting, right? That's inappropriate for most lifts. Does it matter so much on something like a bench press? No. But why are you going to want to have multiple pairs of other footwear for your training? That way you just have your training shoes. So generally speaking, that's the 3 things sort of footwear you're going to want. Either something that's a hard soled and grippy, It could be Chuck Taylors. It could be work boots of some type. I mean, in theory, it could be combat boots. That's fine. I don't own a pair of combat boots. You're going to want minimalist shoes for maximum deadlifting when you're not caring about training carryover as much, meaning it's a better training effect to create a small deficit, right? But if you're going to work with different mats and heights or whatever, you could wear whatever. Or you wear a minimalist if you're trying to, again, get as close to the ground as possible. You could rotate through shoes instead of mats, even for creating those heights. Or if you need the extra mobility that weightlifting shoes add because you're doing deep front squats, you're doing deep Olympic squats, you're doing snatches, cleans, then get some weightlifting shoes. It's going to depend on specifically what you're trying to do. But I think a good work boot or a good pair of Chuck Taylors is all around a good choice. It's a good choice. And I could argue in some cases of training barefooted or in socks. There's even something to that in some cases, right? But that's a whole different topic. All right, next question. On a high frequency 5 to 6 times per week full body program, when should you increase poundages on your movements? Whenever it gets easier or wait for a rest day? Man, I've moved away from even recommending this sort of training. I know that's what we're seeing. Guys like Helms and other people push a little bit. The evidence just isn't there for this form of training, right? Other than maybe some very, very advanced strength athletes, right? Some very advanced strength athletes. Here's what I am going to say. If you decide for whatever reason to use this sort of frequency of training, let's be honest here. If you have to ask anybody for general questions on training, you absolutely have no business running this sort of training, right? When you're talking full body 5 to 6 days a week, you are probably an absolutely advanced lifter. You probably squat 500. You probably deadlift 600 or more. You have a very, very well-grounded training history. You're probably at an elite level on your lifts and you're doing it for specific purposes. You don't have to ask these sort of questions. If you are not a very advanced lifter pushing towards elite, you shouldn't even be considering a training style like this. It's absolutely ridiculous for you. Let's just call it what it is. I'm going to be honest with that. Now, granted, Bulgarian type system's a little different, but even that, you better understand what you're doing. So here's the question I would ask you. If you need to ask me or anyone else questions like this, that sort of training system is absolutely wrong for you. You only run a training system like that when you have so much knowledge as a lifter and a coach that you don't need to ask programming questions anymore. That's where you need to be before you consider a sort of program like that, and you're clearly not there. So I would say scratch that idea. You're not going to get the best results possible out of it. Go with something that you know works. Go with a 4-day upper lower. Make life easier on yourself. All right, next question and last question of the week. What did you think about the new study Brad Schoenfeld put out about single joint exercises causing more hypertrophy than multi-joint exercises? It didn't prove that at all. It proved that 6 sets a week, done twice a week, gives more muscle growth than 3 sets twice a week. That's what it proved in novice lifters. That's basically what it showed. It didn't prove it. That's what it showed. That's all it said. Now, here's the problem with that. Number one, a one-arm dumbbell row. Is the bicep particularly hit? And I'm not saying it's not hit. It obviously was. They got 50% of the growth that a curl did out of that. Okay? But when we talk about this stuff and we say that lat pull downs and rows and whatever can stimulate the same muscle growth in novices, we're talking about if volume is sufficient. Right? That's maybe not sufficient volume. Most experts will count something like an overhand grip row or even like a wide grip bench press as a half set for your arms. And it works very well that way. So he intentionally avoided the volumes he knows. We know that you need somewhere between 5 to 10 actual real work sets to stimulate maximum growth in a session, right? So if we count it as half sets, he knows he gave them 3, but he gave 6, which is between 5 and 10 for curls, right? That's the first problem. Number 2, Novice lifters. Nobody gives a single shit about novice lifter studies. If you are using novice lifters to prove points about hypertrophy, you're a con man or a moron. Period. Full stop. You cannot extrapolate anything meaningful about hypertrophy for anyone outside of novice lifters by using untrained people. Ever. An untrained lifter could ride a bike and their bench press goes up. That's a fact. So, why are we using them at all? Complete bullshit, waste of time, stupid ass study. If he really wanted to measure it correctly, he would have done chin-ups versus curls. That's what he would have done. But he chose goofy-ass one-arm dumbbell rows. I don't think a whole hell of a lot of Brad anymore at this point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.